Hello, I'm Stephen Matchett from Campus Morning Mail, and this is Expert Opinion, where we ask people who know what's going on in education and research, what's going on. Expert Opinion is brought to you by Twig Marketing, Australia's original HE marketing consultancy. Got a brand issue, a message that isn't getting out? Talk to Tim Winkler, tim@twigmarketing.com. And thanks to producer Amanda Johnson from Twig, who makes Expert Opinion happen. Selling study to international students is fiercely competitive at the best of times, but it turns out Australia and New Zealand have a big advantage. They are good, really quite good, at customer contact with people from major markets who are looking for someone to study and who get in touch. It's a major finding from a survey of 107 institutions in ANZ, the US, the UK and Europe, conducted for clients by consultants Edified and UniQuest. The story is in CMM this morning, that's October 6th, and Elissa Newall from Edified is here to talk about what they found. Thanks for sparing the time, and tell us, what did you do, Elissa?
Thanks for having me. So we've conducted a global mystery shopping project, which has involved having prospective international students from a range of different markets make inquiries to 107 universities around the world. The whole point of it is to see how well institutions are responding to student inquiries and to give some data to help institutions benchmark themselves against each other and see whether they're doing well, whether they could be doing better. And you're right, the key finding that we've said is Australia and New Zealand have actually done really well, generally above the global average in most of the criteria that we assess. But there's also good performance by Wales and Sweden. Sweden in particular tended to be the most responsive in the world. And the Welsh were more kind of warm and friendly and kind of giving that personal touch more so than other countries in the world. Unfortunately, some of the institutions in North America didn't rate as highly on most of the criteria, kind of lagging behind the global averages. And, I sort of wonder, is this a evidence perhaps of the approach that Australian and New Zealand institutions, international students are big business, we're really slick about our marketing and our student acquisition kind of strategies, whereas you might kind of have that view that some institutions in the US in particular, don't have that same mindset when it comes to international students, and maybe this is what's showing when we see the kind of.
But the Canadians didn't do real well, did they?
Not as well. They were sort of on par with the US. I might make a comment to say that, in Australia and New Zealand, it was typically universities who are in the research, but in the US and Canada, you've got the college system as well as the university system. And from what I know, the colleges are smaller. They may not be as well resourced as your larger universities. So I think that's it's unfair to say they're doing badly. I think there's a tie there between resourcing and capability and how well you can.
Okay. And the Welsh did well, but the Irish didn't?
Yes, I don't want to start any sort of tensions there, but the Irish did really well when it came to peer-to-peer communication. So we've heard a lot about these tools, especially over COVID and lockdowns around digital tools of helping students chat with other students. And it did seem out of all of the groups worldwide, the Irish institutions got the highest score for peer-to-peer. So they're really good at engaging their student ambassadors, training them up and having passionate, sort of advocates in their students who are talking with other students. It was just those other channels really where prospects are inquiring directly to universities that, on the whole, were not as great as other areas of the world.
But the Brits were good on peer-to-peer?
The Brits were average, neither good nor bad, neutral, doing okay. There has been huge take-up for the Brits and the Welsh and the Scots as well, because during COVID, I think nearly every institution launched a peer-to-peer platform. So I think that the stat was around 90% of the UK institutions having some kind of offer. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all serviced well. Having the tool doesn't necessarily correlate to great performance. So we really saw a range, and it comes down to never comes down to the tool. It always comes down to the quality of the people, the training, the culture, the care, what's being done, the person on the other end of the inquiry, really.
This is so interesting. I mean, I'll get to methodology in a minute, but I'm just curious, when you talk to the looking at the New Zealanders, I mean, in some ways they've got something of a disadvantage in that they've got to explain to people where they actually are.
Yes, that's true. We were having a humorous, joke recently within Edified, sharing pictures of world maps, because there are so many world maps that don't even have New Zealand on it. So there is this challenge, you're right, of having to first promote where, the country as well as then the institution. The New Zealand's institutions did fairly well. So Australia and New Zealand, as a combined, we've published the report with a combined average. So we're not trying to name or shame any, I'll let you kind of drill down to particular institutions. Australia was ahead of New Zealand in most of the categories. The area where New Zealand did better than Australia was around the helpfulness of their replies. So they were the most helpful in the world. And they were actually a nudge more persuasive in the way they described themselves. And I think it does come down to that weaving in the why study in New Zealand as well as why study at our institution.
But they've always, their last, over the years, their last corporate national brand campaigns have been pretty strong.
Yeah, they definitely have. And I think New Zealand universities as well, and probably Education New Zealand, have had a really strong focus on student experience. And this sort of language has, I'd say maybe in the last 1 to 2 years, really gone up in the Australian universities. And in some parts of the world, it's not necessarily even a thing, but you will find in New Zealand universities, director of student experience, these kind of positions, and people who really care about it and are, looking for student voice input, finding out what students are thinking and feeling, and really trying to address any issues and be proactive about their kind of designing a leading experience. So, I think that's part of where New Zealand does have an edge over Australia.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us about the methodology. How did you do this? It's a very big project.
It is a big project. We actually started this project last year, only in the UK, because with COVID, there was a spike. Everyone globally felt it. Yes, uncertainty, lots of questions from students, and inquiries just spiked. And so there was this sort of concern with some of the UK universities of, we're really snowed under. How are we doing compared to others? And there was no benchmark. There was no data source for comparison. So that was the first iteration of this. It was focused on the UK only. And we had about 40% of the UK universities involved. It was really interesting and huge interest from, our clients in other parts of the world of, well, why don't you do this globally? So what we did is we went out and we said, well, we're going to make this into a global benchmark. And institutions, can pay to be involved. We made sure that the sample was representative of a broad profile, so we couldn't just sort of have, one uni in one country. We had some countries joining as a whole group so that they could benchmark their entire, university group. And what we did is we had a group of mystery shoppers. They went out. They had an identity, representing a particular type of student, a professional, a school leaver, someone who's wanting to transfer from their foundation program into a degree. And they made their inquiries to the institutions, captured all the details. And then we have a scoring system which looks at, a number of different criteria, which are the inquiry channels, what channels are offered and how easy are they to find and access on the institution's website. Everyone, usually does pretty good at that because that's easy. That's marketing stuff. You get it right once and it keeps working for you. The next criteria is responsiveness. So firstly, did they respond? Secondly, how quickly did they respond?
And what sort of, what on responses at all, what was the number, what was the percentage like?
So globally, we had 4 in 5 students who got a reply. So that means 1 in 5 didn't. And when we say they don't get a reply, we're not waiting for months and months. You know, our study waits for 3 weeks for an email reply, which, you know, I think that's beyond reasonable. Anyone who's not getting a reply after 3 weeks, they're probably already moved on with their decision making another institution.
So that's 1 in 5 students, people who out of the blue come to an institution and say, hello, I'm thinking about giving you money. Tell me how wonderful you are. And they can't be fagged to respond.
Well, yeah, I think there's probably a number of reasons why they might not respond. Resourcing, you know, maybe not being able to handle all the inquiries coming in. Some institutions have data challenges, you know, oops, the web form's not going into the CRM like we thought it was, or someone's on leave and we don't have someone covering that. But yes,
that's very polite.
20% of the interest that might be there for an institution is kind of going to waste, you know, as an opportunity that's not able to be converted. Yeah.
Tell me, how does, I mean, this is a separate channel entirely to what goes through agents. So your mystery people will identify themselves as individuals saying we haven't come to you via an agent. Yep,
that's right. I guess there's a few, just to kind of clarify, you know, if you're someone who works in a university, inquiry function, sometimes what you get is leads, you know, names and email addresses that might come through websites like your, you know, Find a Uni, Hot Courses, you know, these sort of course search things. That's not an inquiry. That's just a name and an email address. What we were doing is people who've been on your website, read about your courses and have some specific questions, and they've shared, you know, they're presented as a pretty good quality, you know, inquiry, someone who seems very qualified and interested. So yeah, they are genuine, presenting as genuine inquiries.
And what sort of is there a clear pattern of response in the fact of students people contacting who say I would like to talk more, who felt they had a good experience?
Yeah, there definitely was. So one of the, going back, we were talking about the criteria. So we look at how good the communication was. We look at whether the university follows up. And then the final criteria we look at is impact, which is we ask our mystery shoppers to give their feeling. So at the end of this, how do I feel? Was it positive, neutral, or negative? And how likely are you to actually continue, you know, engaging with that institution? Because that, as to your question, that's the crux of the matter. It's not just about whether the inquiry got answered. It's about whether you're impacting the student's likelihood to continue, you know, and there'd be a viable kind of recruitment prospect. And so what we found is that it was about 1/3 felt negative, about 1/3 felt neutral, and about 1/3 felt positive. And of those who had a positive experience, it absolutely correlated with that, yes, I would continue further. So we looked at that third who said they had a positive experience. 80% of them said they would be very, you know, the most strong on our criteria, very likely to continue with that institution.
There was one in Sweden that did particularly well, the name of which I've forgotten.
So we have published sort of the best in a number of different categories. The one in Sweden is Dalarna University. So that means that out of all the European institutions, I think there were 24, you know, across a range of European countries, they were the one that got the highest rating from students on that impact category. So the most students said, yes, I would continue with this university.
And Massey in New Zealand was very good on email responses.
They were. So that's the other angle we took. We kind of thought, well, it's really interesting to see who does well by channel. So, you know, who's the best live chat, the best peer-to-peer. Massey was the best by email, which is a real achievement because every university offers email. You know, that's the most basic thing. And really, it's a thing a lot of universities get quite wrong because they simply get a template, copy and paste, and away goes the reply without too much further thought. Massey were really great. You know, their response was helpful, it was thoughtful. They had a little bit of selling the university, not in a over kind of bearing way, but in a really nice, interesting, oh, I didn't know that about the uni. That's really helpful. And just had that warm tone where you feel like as a student, it kind of gives that impression, yeah, I could go back to that person and ask them another question. They're actually really welcoming and want to hear from me. Whereas other universities, some you can really feel from the tone. I think one of the auto replies that we came across, the inquiry had gone in and the student got the auto responder coming back to say, I've received your inquiry and I will deal with it later. This kind of language, is really reflective of obviously that's leading to a negative experience for a student, but it's still out there, and there's still, I think, a workload issue, or this perception that inquiries are work, we don't get anything from them, we've just got to kind of clear the inbox every day, or those kind of those ways of thinking are still there, rather than sort of this is a sales opportunity, we've got some prospects, how are we going to really connect with them? Maybe I should reach out to them again and see if we can get them along to our event, this kind of alternative way.
Edith Cowan, I can't remember what it was, but Edith Cowan stood out for something.
Yeah, I think so. Edith Cowan was pretty good. We had, I couldn't really say, like, out of the Australian institutions, most of them were at the top end of the pack. I won't name the ones that were at the bottom, but we had, ATN universities did really well. We had, Griffith, we had Edith Cowan, we had RMIT, like really good, a good range of unis that are just hitting the, above average kind of part of the scale. And I think it's really, for me, like, it was really positive to see some universities getting these top marks, because you go, well, it can be done. It's not that there's these impossible standards of, oh, I'd like a reply within a couple of days and I'd like it to answer my questions and to sound friendly. These are not impossible standards.
Where were your mystery students, mystery shoppers from? I think India, Malaysia. Yep,
India, Malaysia, China. We had Brazil, and we had France and Vietnam.
Okay, and so that's a pretty broad range of students. Does anybody change the tone of the communication depending on where students are from?
Yeah, I'd say rarely. We didn't pick up anything like that. We had a few universities, I think being a bit more, Australia and New Zealand being a bit more personalised to the inquiries from the French students, because I think that would be a bit of a unique one, getting we're all about diversity these days. So giving a bit more personal love and attention to that. One of the interesting ones, we didn't use a Nigerian student mystery shopper for the Australian and New Zealand unis, but we did for the UK and for the US, because that's just a more common market for them. And the experience was quite different. So the Nigerian mystery shopper had a really great experience on general with the UK unis. I think our kind of rating, they got about 66 out of 100, whereas the North Americans was 45 out of 100 for that particular persona. So it just shows, and for the UK, that was above, their average of how they dealt with other inquiries, and for the US and Canada was below the average of how they dealt with their other inquiries. So something about maybe this market is more important to some countries than others. Maybe we're going to prioritize this one a bit more, or maybe we're going to leave it to the bottom of the pile. Yeah.
What about technology? I mean, a lot of institutions you mentioned use bots as part of the comms process.
Yeah. Well, that was something we thought, it gets talked about a lot. Technology is going to solve everything, right? And we wanted to understand, with those that offered live chat, how were they servicing it? Because what we hear from our clients is there's a real interest to do live chat, but the question always comes down to resourcing. So we wanted to know, well, how many of those are using a bot? So the answer is 1 in 5 of the live chats involved a bot. There were a mix of good bots and some that are very kind of surface level, pretty basic, not useful really to anyone. The best kind of approach that we saw is where we're using a bot, say, to answer very simple queries, or filter students perhaps in different directions. And then once it gets to a point where the inquiry's too complex, it actually routes to the relevant staff member so they can move on to a human conversation. So I think that's actually probably, that's what I would recommend to someone. Say, well, that's a way of not using humans to do that, filtering and sort of work that can be done very efficiently by technology, but you have to be able to get through to the point of talking to a person who can answer your individual questions.
Yeah. What's going to come next, do you think?
Well, the thing that's on my mind is around WhatsApp and mobile messaging, in general, but WhatsApp is seemingly the kind of global leader in this space. There are some institutions, we started to track it last year, like who's offering WhatsApp as a channel, and it was about 10% last year. It's sort of increased this year a little bit, sort of in that, depending on the country, 20 to 25% range. And it's not necessarily being used as a main communication channel. It might be a staff member is like a staff member in a particular country is offering their WhatsApp details for students who want to connect. But some institutions have gone down the route of a business WhatsApp account, and the little icon is sitting there alongside all the other main inquiry channels. And that's just a way that students can straight away off the bat, especially if they're on mobile on the website, click on that and begin a WhatsApp conversation. We work with UniQuest on developing the methodology and kind of the focus areas for the research each year. Edified delivers the research and we do the kind of operational side of it. But one of the conversations we've been having is about WhatsApp, because it is kind of a very fast growing channel. I think there was something about a 45% increase in WhatsApp inquiries. UniQuest are an outsourcing company that manages inquiries for a number of UK universities. So
they're UK based, are they?
UK based, yeah. And they, sort of have this aggregate data, which is really helpful. And that's what we draw on to design the focus areas each year. So I think we probably don't have enough institutions that offer WhatsApp yet to be able to, make that a useful use of the mystery shopping. But in future, I think that will be a trend, and we'll just keep a watch on those numbers and of how many institutions are offering that. The fact that everyone offers email, this is my platform would be that universities are all about websites and text and email, and students are all about mobile and video and messaging. So we've kind of got this different, a bit of a mismatch between the way that universities like to work and the way that students like to work. So
that raises the question is, did you ask where they, did your shoppers ask, did the universities ask your shoppers how they found them?
Really, no.
Okay. Yeah.
Most universities did not ask the shoppers any questions. They just kind of took the inquiry or the questions the shopper had asked, gave a reply, whether that be on chat or whether that be on the phone or on, we did the phone for the UK, sorry, not for Australia, or on email. They answered the questions and said goodbye. That they sort of didn't go that next step and say, how did you find us? Or what would you like to do in your career? Or, would you like me to connect you with our rep in your country? Like, no sort of proactiveness on the university's part, except for a few who were really got those good scores.
Is there a problem there just of scale that an institution has only got so many resources to throw at this? Does the question become whether how you identify the cold contact prospects and the ones that you want to invest more time in?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and that's sort of the conversation that it comes down to. Ideally, we'd love to provide everyone this great service. That would be wonderful, but it's not always feasible. And the kind of everyone agrees. I think everyone that you speak with agrees. Yes, prioritization is the way to handle that. We need to identify which programs we're trying to fill, which are the courses that we don't have enough interest in. If we can get inquiries about those, well, we really should, prioritise those. Or maybe there's international student markets that we're trying to grow because it's a new focus area for the uni. We should kind of find those students. But the reality is that not every university has the kind of tech in place to really make that happen. There's conferences and white papers and everything going on about, investments in MarTech, and it is happening, but I think a lot of institutions have big platforms sitting in the garage, but they're not being used properly yet. So we did ask the participating institutions a little bit about their tech setup. And what some of the interesting findings that came back is that 1 in 5 say that they're relying on basic tools like spreadsheets, shared Outlook, inboxes to manage inquiries. So if you just got a list of emails in your inbox, how could those staff really prioritize them apart from going through and reading every one and then flagging to say, so, technology is part of it. And also that challenge, I think it's always a challenge to prioritize because you want to say yes to everybody, it's hard, prioritization means deliberately saying no to some people, or saying these types of students will only get a basic reply, or they'll only get a reply if we get to it. That's the hard reality of it. But I think it has to be done.
Insofar as you can tell, are institutions in country markets doing much outbound research in terms of what they want to develop next? I ask particularly in the context of distance, of students staying in home country to study. Yeah,
I think that'd be a really interesting area to explore. I don't think I know the answer to that. Certainly, I don't know if research is happening. The conversation is certainly happening, and that's an area of, we've got all these students who travel to go and do their studies. What about these other students? T&E's been a fringe activity for a lot of universities for probably always. Some have made that a very big part of who they are and what they do. But I think that there's one changing student kind of needs and wants and behaviours of that desire maybe to stay in their own country. But there's also that reality of, there's a cohort of students who will not have the desire to travel ever, or the means to travel ever.
Yeah.
And that's a different segment that has, if you get into marketing terms, it hasn't been sort of targeted yet by Australian or, global sort of institutions. I think a lot of institutions are thinking seriously about that.
That is so interesting. So do you do survey consulting work for individual institutions?
Yeah, that's the most of what we do.
Without giving anything away, what you're getting asked to do changing?
Well, I'd say we have, yes. I mean, a lot of institutions are relooking at their pricing strategy and their customer engagement and student experience approaches. So that has certainly been, a lot of our work. What we haven't seen yet, and maybe that's just, our part of the world, previously, in previous years, might have heard a few more conversations around testing different products in market. I think maybe universities might have had some of these things ready to go, and then the world changed quite drastically. We've had to go back to the drawing board. So I think that will be maybe what we see in the next couple of years.
This is really interesting. I mean, it really, really is interesting. I could waste your time for hours talking about it. But I know you're busy, and I've presuming your time far too long. Thank you, Elissa. Thank you very much, Elissa Newall, for talking about this. The stories in Campus Morning Mail this week. What's your email address if anyone wants to get in touch?
Yeah, sure. It's Elissa, ELISSA @edified.com.au.
You heard it there. Give her a call or email. Thank you so much for your time. I hope we get to talk again. This is Stephen Matchett. This is Expert Opinion, and we're out. Thank you.